All right, guys, it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order for Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023. Attendance at the start of the meeting. I haven't logged into Zoom, but I'm assuming Natalie's there. I'll log into Zoom as we're speaking, Natalie, so I can see you too.
Thank you.
Here it goes. But yes, 100% with Councillor Jolly virtual. I need a motion to adopt the agenda. We have no changes that I am aware of, so Councillor Killick. Go ahead.
That the October 3rd, 2023 agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you. I'll call for the vote. Voting's closed. That passes unanimously. We have a couple registered speakers. Most of them are speaking to a topic. So I have Todd Walsh registered to speak to 7.1. We have the auditors, of course, and I've got Mike Howes who wants to speak to the snowflake schedule. Are the auditors with us? Because they're time specific for right at 1. They are. So I'm going to go, because that's time specific, I will go to agenda item 8.1, which is the external audit plan, which is on page 27 of your package, and then we'll come back to presentations. So just let me get into. Okay, page 27. Diane or Bill, did you want to introduce this?
Actually, Stella Tam with our financial operations controller is going to do the introductions.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Stella Tam from Financial Operations Controller for Finance and then Strategic Services. I would like to introduce Sheldon Jacobs, partner at KPMG.
Thank you, Stella. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure to present our fiscal 2023 audit plan to Council. I will, if it's fine with you, I will share my screen and I will walk through our slides that were previously provided in your package.
Go ahead.
Can everybody see that fine?
We sure can.
Perfect. So thank you very much. I look forward to presenting our plan for 2023. Last time we went was April earlier of this year when we wrapped up fiscal 2022. So really, there's the odd topic here that we did talk about back in April. And so there'll be a bit of a continuation in terms of the dialogue. So what I'm going to do is just jump into this first slide here, which is our audits highlight slide. And it kind of gives you an overview of the topics that I'll be speaking to here this afternoon. So in terms of the scope of our audit, we really have 5 specific deliverables for you, which is we will audit the consolidated financial statements of the City of St. Albert. We also audit the financial statements of the St. Albert Public Library Board, the Municipal Financial Information Return, which goes to Alberta Municipal Affairs, the FCSS Support Services. There's a special report that is done annually that's required to have an audit. And this year also, our work has expanded a bit in that there was some funding that's been received by the city, and under the grant program, under the Green Municipal Fund program, there is a audit requirement to audit the expenditures that were qualified for that funding over the funding program period. So that'll be new for this year, and we've included that into our work plan for fiscal 2023. I'll also talk about our audit strategy and the changes to our audit strategy, talk a little bit about the entities that are part of the consolidated group for the city's financial statements. And we do have a professional responsibility to speak to some specific risks associated with auditing financial statements, which are common with pretty much most of the audits that we do on a from an industry perspective, and then also with respect to some changes for this year as well. So I'll just go through these slides here. If you have any questions, feel free to ask those questions, or we can do that at the end of the presentation. The concept of materiality is something that we presented in the past. So as auditors, we assess financial statements and we identify, or it's our objective to identify any misstatements in financial statements that could be material to a user of that financial statement. So if there is a misstatement in the financial statements that would potentially lead a user to a different decision on those financial statements, or would take an action with respect to the financial affairs of the city that would be materially different had the information been presented in a different manner, those are the types of errors and concerns that we would have with respect to and would be included in financial statements. So an audit is done on a test basis. We don't test every transaction in an organization, but we do a variety of tests, a variety of sample work. We subject the various transactions that the city enters into during the course of the year to various different audit routines and testing, and we use the concept of materiality when we do that. So consistent with past years and consistent with municipalities in general, we typically benchmark materiality as a percentage of total expenditures. And so this year, materiality has been pegged at $6.5 million. Last year was $6 million, so just slightly above, because projected expenditures are expected to be a bit higher than last year. What does this mean? This does not mean that we only look at large transactions over $6.5 million. We look at a variety of transactions, smaller transactions, transactions that sort of span the continuum from small to very large transactions during the course of our audit. But what we do from an audit perspective is we accumulate any observations that we have during the audit, any findings that we have during the audit, any exceptions we might come across. And to the extent that we find errors in financial reporting that would come anywhere near $6.5 million, we would be having discussions with administration as to whether or not the financial statements need to be adjusted for those items. So it's really a benchmark, and it's a scope that allows us to execute our audit in an efficient manner without having to audit all the transactions in any organization. It allows us to do our work on a test basis. Moving forward, one of the things that we always like to do is report whenever we utilize the skill set and the expertise of any individuals that are outside of KPMG. This year, we're going to talk a little bit about, in one of the other slides, and something we talked about in April, is that the city and its financial statements, and this is common with all municipalities across Canada, has to record what we call an asset retirement obligation. And I'll speak to that in a few minutes, but as part of doing our work and our audit work over asset retirement obligations, we will be utilizing the work done by certain consultants hired by management to assist in providing and identifying those assets that have retirement obligations that need to be recorded in the financial statements. So administration has engaged external consultants to assist with this assessment, and we will be reviewing and we'll be relying on their work as we go through our audit for fiscal 2023. And again, I'll just touch on that in a few minutes. In terms of our audit plan, I focused on this first page, or on this page right now, really kind of three areas where our plan is going to deviate from what we've done historically. So the first item is the asset retirement obligations. And as I mentioned at the top of this presentation, we spoke about this in our April meeting. There was an accounting standard change that requires any obligations associated with the ultimate retirement of an asset to be recorded in a municipality's financial statements prior to when that cost is actually incurred. The example that we talked about back in April was asbestos, and that's a very common item that we deal with in municipalities. So if you have a building that has asbestos, at some point in time when that asset, that building is demolished and retired, that asbestos has to be removed. And because that asbestos has to be removed, what this new accounting standard says is, look, in 5, 10, 20, 30 years, whenever that cost might actually be incurred, we need to recognize today that we have a liability for that future cost. So kind of keeping it in simple terms, what happens is administration is going to need to identify the assets that have a legal obligation for any retirement or reclamation activities at the end of their lives. And then that number will essentially be discounted back to today and recorded as a liability in the financial statements. And again, this is a change that's common to all municipalities right across the country, so it won't be new just for the city. So there will be enhanced effort, time and effort associated with this new standard this year. It's kind of some of the key things that we need to address this year is just the completeness of the assets that have been identified, getting an understanding in terms of any legal obligations that the city will have with respect to retirement activities, and then also assessing the costs that have been determined by external consultants, for instance, like engineers, and or administration, and then auditing those amounts to ensure that they've been properly presented in the financial statements. The second item is there's a handful of other accounting standard changes that have changed this year as well, and they are specific to municipalities. These, though, having reviewed them with administration, we don't believe they're going to have a significant impact on your financial reporting. For the most part, it's disclosure related. So if you look at a set of financial statements, there's some notes to the financial statements, and in those notes to the financial statements, there's likely going to be a bit more transparency around a few of these items that we have to deal with this year going forward as a result of these new standard changes. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on it because we don't think it's going to be that material to the city of St. Albert, but definitely the asset retirement obligation item is something that is going to require a bit of heavy lifting on behalf of administration and then throughout our audit process. The other item that's different for fiscal 2023 is the implementation of a new payroll system. So as a result of that, we will have to gain an understanding of the changes to your control environment and the changes to how payroll transactions are actually transacted through the new system, and then amend our audit procedures accordingly. So really, I think this slide gives you a good snapshot in terms of where we were historically and where the changes will be this year, that there will be additional focus on. And as a result of the audit effort that we undertake during fiscal 2023, we will come back in April and report on these specific items to council at that point in time. This next slide talks about group audit scoping. So in our industry, we consider the financial statements of the city of St. Albert to be what we call group financial statements. And what I mean by that is your financial statements are really comprised of three components: the accounts of the city of St. Albert, the accounts of the St. Albert Public Library Board, and the accounts of the Arts and Heritage Foundation. And the reason why is those are the entities that really are controlled by the city. As you can see on this slide, the transactions and balances associated with both the Public Library Board and as well as the Heritage Foundation are quite insignificant in relation to the overall activities of the city. So as a result of that, our audit work will be exclusively focused on the transactions and the balances that are maintained within the accounting records of the city itself, because those other two entities are rather insignificant to your financial statements taken as a whole. No changes there, just wanted to highlight that to council. The next item is risks associated with financial reporting. And I mentioned at the top of my presentation, there are certain risks that we have to deal with respect to all of our audits. And management override is one of those. Management's always in a unique situation in that every organization will have a control environment and various internal controls in place. And the city has many controls over financial reporting, but management could be in a situation where they could override an internal control and perpetrate fraud. So from an industry perspective, KPMG as auditors have a responsibility to assess whether or not there's an elevated risk that there could be an override of controls to perpetrate fraud by a member of management. So that's something that we include in every audit that we do specific procedures to address whether or not we have concerns around management override. Again, any findings that are of any concern, we would report to you at the conclusion of our audit. I spoke briefly, already talked about the asset retirement obligations area, which will be new going forward. On this slide, we've basically talked about some of the areas that we would focus on during the course of our work, and I touched on that already, really identifying the legal obligations that exist to retire any assets, assessing the time frame when those obligations will have to be settled, and then also assessing the quantum of that liability that will be incurred at a future time and how that amount has been reflected and calculated for the purposes of fiscal 2023 and every subsequent period thereafter. I won't get into this slide in too much detail. Anytime we're dealing with accounting transactions that are going to happen many years in the future, we deal with what we call estimation uncertainty. So as a result of the work that we do, we have to be reasonably comfortable that any estimates that are made by administration are reasonable and make sense in the context of the liability that we're measuring. Some key milestones and deliverables, really no change to our schedule from past periods. In August, we started to commence our planning procedures. We conclude those typically by the end of October. In November, we do interim audit work. So we don't save all of our audit work for year end. We try to advance as much of the audit work as we can prior to year end, and that reduces the amount of heavy lifting that needs to be done post year end. And then really the majority and the remainder of the audit work is done from February throughout March. And then in March, we do anticipate having our closing meeting with the library board on their financial statements, and then subsequently between that date and later in April, we'll conclude on our audit on the accounts of the city. And then as planned right now, we'll be reporting our findings to council on April 23rd. And that will provide sufficient time for final reporting to the government on the financial activities of the city. We've included 3 appendices in our presentation. They're really there for information purposes, so I don't plan to go through those in any detail, just to respect the time associated with, or the time allocated to my presentation here today. So that really is an overview of our audit plan for fiscal 2023. As you can see, we have a few changes to, or compared to past periods. We've had really good communication and planning meetings with administration to date. Timelines are lined up well, and really looking forward to executing our interim audit procedures here starting later this fall. And that really concludes the formal presentation of our audit plan, and I'd be open to any questions council may have.
All right, thank you, Sheldon. It's okay if I call you Sheldon. I think that our council is so simple, we never have any questions, but Councillor Killick has a question to start us off.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation and the introduction by the mayor. The question I have, it just goes back to the asset retirement obligations, and this is fairly new as I read, but the example you gave was the building that's has asbestos going to be costing us something down the road to remediate that, and we have to account for whenever that is going to be remediated and have it on the books now. My question is, does that example also translate over to municipal owned land where we would have a liability to do a environmental cleanup of the land?
It would, yes. Anytime you have a legal obligation to do cleanup activities, those obligations typically will now be, if they haven't historically, and I don't want to overcomplicate it, but we've had a couple different buckets in terms of how we've accounted for liabilities in the past. I think suffice it to say, pretty much any liability where there's a legal obligation that a municipality has to settle at some point in the future associated with whether it be land, tangible buildings, you might, even leasing. municipalities lease buildings. At the end of the lease of a building, you will have to typically bring the building back to the original state before you actually enter the building. So any of your leaseholds have to be removed. Those types of obligations that are contractual or legal now have to be recorded in the financial statements prior to when you actually settle them. We do that on a net present value basis. So we do give consideration to the fact that the liability will grow over time as you get closer to the date when you actually have to cut the check and pay for those expenditures.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Killick. Good question. Not a simple one. Any other questions from members of council? Councillor Jolly, you're good? Okay, I need a motion. This report and plan has to be approved by council. So if anyone. No, you're first, Ken. You're up.
I won. That the 2023 audit plan prepared by KPMG provided as an attachment to the October 3rd, 2023 agenda report titled Audit Planning Report for the year ended December 31, 2023 be approved.
Any opening comments on that?
No, I mean, this is
Routine.
required,
Yeah.
required under the MGA.
All right, I appreciate the plan. Mr. Jacobs, I will call for the vote. Voting's closed. And that passes unanimously. So I guess the next date in the calendar for us will be in the spring when we present the findings. Yeah. So thank you for joining us and we'll see you in the spring.
Thank you.
All right, now that we're done with the time specific one, I'm going to get to presentations. So Mike, question for you. Do you want to wait till we get to that agenda item? Okay, so we'll wait to that and Todd is up first anyway, so really no presentations. I'm just going to go straight to consent. Councillor Hughes, you want to do consent? Go ahead.
It's how we do it, like one on each side of the board on this side. Okay, the recommendations in the following agenda reports be approved. 6.1 regular council meeting minutes, September 19th, 2023. 8.2 quarterly policing update, RCMP Q1 2023-2024. 8.3 update to council policy on policing services, CPS 02. 8.4 council sponsorship policy, and 11.1 2023 St. Albert Sturgeon Hospice Association Christmas tree light up program.
Perfect. I'll call for the vote on those. I'll look this way now. Voting's closed and that passes unanimously. Okay, first up is committee business. So from the St. Albert Policing Committee, we have the annual report. Resorts in my head, I guess. And we have Todd with us. Hope you're feeling better, Todd. Good to see you. I'll just send it right to you to go over what you have provided to us in our package.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I'm happy to present the 22 Policing Committee annual report. This is a high level, I guess, report detailing some of the activities we did in that year. Just to bring to your attention, we were coming out of COVID that year. So the balance took place from April to the end of the calendar year, but our 6 priorities stayed consistent through the year. So it was supporting ongoing committee operations and consulting with the community, increasing awareness of our public complaint director. Priority 3, working with the RCMP in charge on policing priorities. Priority 4, supporting community member development. Priority 5, engaging public on policing matters, and priority 6, collaborating with council and organizations. And we're happy to say we progressively started to engage the community more for the balance of the year. And we continue to do it into the next year in 2023. If there's any questions, I know the report was presented. I'm not going to go into too much detail that could be read, but if there is any high level information that you didn't see or wanted to see, please let me know. And yeah, and the one item that we did not include was the upcoming work plan. The reason for that is we are changing the priorities, and instead of doing a one-year work plan, which was really cumbersome on the committee because of the volunteer and one-year term limits for executive positions, we made the executive decision to go with a 3-year plan and a 3-year work plan to have some continuity and align better with the annual policing priorities, which are crime reduction, mental health, and vulnerable communities, and domestic violence. So we want to align it so everything's aligned and get out of the old way of thinking on this plan and go to a more streamlined, effective use of our volunteers and present to the community. But that is, in a nutshell, our 22 annual report, and I'm open for questions if you have any.
Sure, I've got just a couple. On priority 2 is increase awareness of the public complaint director position.
Yes.
You said you did some advertising in the Gazette and community groups. Community groups, I'm assuming, is like Facebook?
Yeah, community groups, Facebook. Kristen, our PDC director, is really active on just getting the word out. And we're going to shift it a bit because of the new provincial legislation. We're trying to get a better understanding of how the complaints is going to be set up. So we're doing our best at the local level, trying to get awareness. And the early resolution has been really effective with the inspector and people calling our complaint director and dealing with them instead of going through the bureaucracy of the RCMP in their complaint process, really doing early resolution of any incidences that the inspector could just take care of or his staff can take care of. So it's been really effective on our side to do early resolution.
Good. You wouldn't have any idea if the complaint, like how many complaints, if they're going up, if they're going down?
It's consistent. It's 1 or 2, but we can provide that on our next meeting because I believe the council's joining us, but I can also send that through as well.
No, it can wait till we get together.
Okay.
In priority 5, you talked about doing a community town hall that was delayed
Mhm.
because of COVID, but you plan to do it in 2023.
Yeah.
Has that happened?
No, it's not happened. We're gonna work with Ryan to establish something. That was the whole key, is to do a town hall with the inspector. But we'll get there, and it's still on the agenda. It's on our to-do list. We'll come up with probably some brainstorming ideas moving forward, but that's still a go. So it hasn't been effective yet. So we haven't hit that mark, but it's still on our to-do list.
Okay, and then the last question I have was about the budget.
Yes.
We allocated about 20,000, which you barely touched it this year, which
Yeah.
appreciated.
And
so we might need to have a conversation maybe when we get together in person about what the actual budget should be.
yeah, and the reason why you're seeing that is we go on, and Everett could probably correct me if I'm wrong. The St. Albert budget is fiscal. We're on the RCMP and calendar budget. So some of those numbers are going to be, we had expenditures in our, I guess, term, but they won't show because they were specific on calendar dates. Everett could probably clear it up a little bit better than I can. But we do have expenditures for conferences and stuff that weren't present in that just because of the reporting period, and that's specific to calendar, not fiscal. And St. Albert budget is on fiscal, not calendar. So.
Okay. All right. I don't know, Everett, can you add to that?
Good afternoon. Just very briefly, excuse me. The one thing you'll see that is very light is the financials for this report. Much of that had to do with COVID, the reintroduction of a lot of the different conferences that the committee members go to, of course. And to Todd's point, the calendar does line up with the City of St. Albert's, obviously, calendar. But again, given that this report is the previous year's report, we're not showing actual costs for this year. There was a lot of things didn't happen during the time of this report. I suspect we'll see an increase in the usage of those budget dollars. Again, that's something we can bring back. a bit of a forecast, but I don't think it's a true reflection of what this committee actually needs today, though, of what you're seeing in that report.
Okay, good. Councillor Killick, you had a question? Oh, or did I ask? a question?
You asked exactly the questions on the community police side
Okay.
of things. Yep. Thank
All right, anyone else? Councillor Jolly, do you have any questions? No? I see no further questions. I guess it was a good report. So Councillor,
Perfect.
I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to move the report. I'm just waiting for it to come up. All right. Don't have it. There we go. Sorry. That the 2022 St. Albert Policing Committee Annual Report provided as an attachment to the October 3rd, 2023 City Council agenda be received as information.
All right, anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, again, as a council representative on this committee, I've been actually very impressed with the amount of effort and work that has come out of the committee, particularly as already mentioned by Mr. Walsh. We did face some challenges like everybody else in relation to pandemic recovery. And the real purpose of our committee is really that balance between the independence of the RCMP and us as a governing body. What interestingly, I'd like to point out that we recently, as of last Friday, met with the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP, Curtis Zablocki, and his senior leadership team, plus a member of the provincial government, and they're very aware of the work, and they're looking at our community and the way we've set up our policing committee as potentially a best practice. However, I mean, saying that, I mean, they are looking also at some regs in the changing of the Police Act and some other that may change actually how policing committees, policing commissions actually look like in the future. But knowing where we're at already with our committee, I think we're well served and well ahead of that. Anything that comes out of the provincial government.
Does your committee look at the Police Act amendments proposed?
Yes,
Yeah.
one of our vice chair, Mr. Ian Sanderson, is also the chair of the Alberta Association of Police Governance. And he's in that role as well as our role. He's a really strong advocate and actually has potentially access to provincial government representatives who are looking at changing the regs.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
he was with us as well on Friday.
That's nice. Anyone else on debate? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Voting is closed. That passes unanimously. Mr. Walsh, we'll see you in shortly when council joins you. But until then, just accept our appreciation for all that you are doing for that committee. It does seem to be a success. So
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council, and hope to see everyone at our next meeting, I believe on the 10th. So have a good day.
You too. All right, that was 7.1. We've done 8.1. 8.2 is on consent. Let me just get to it. The motion read that the St. Albert RCMP Municipal Police Report and the St. Albert Municipal Detachment Crime Statistics provided as an attachment to the October 3rd, 2023 Council Agenda Report entitled Quarterly Policing Update RCMP Q1 23-24 be received as information. And then the next agenda item was also on consent. So I'm going to go to that. Which read that this was that the council policy on policing services, CPS 02, provided as attachment to the October 3rd, 2023 agenda report entitled Update to Council Policy on Policing Services, CPS 02 be approved. And I think the next one was on consent too. Hold on. Council sponsorship policy, the motion that we approved was that council policy CCC 21 attached to the agenda report entitled Council Sponsorship Policy dated October 3rd, 2023 be updated, or sorry, be approved. And was the next one on consent? I don't think so. Fees and charges. All right, so I have down on my list Stanley Chan to present this. Stanley with us?
Mayor, I'm here.
Awesome, I'll let you take it away.
Sure. So this is the second and third reading of the master rates and fees and charges contained in bylaws. We had no motions related to any of the master rates or any of the fees and bylaws. We had two motions related, one to the change to the policy CFS 16 municipal fees and charges, and one to a fee related to a schedule in council policy CFS 16 municipal fees and charges. So happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, so there was some confusion here that there was some motions, but both Councillor Killick and Councillor Bermansky's motions were unrelated to this fees and charges bylaw. That's why they're listed on as number 4 and 5, because we don't need to deal with them before we deal with this fees and charges. So why don't I entertain, well, questions? Sorry, is there any questions on the fees and charges? Why don't we do 1, 2, and 3? And then we'll get into the councillor proposed motions. So does anyone want to move the second reading?
Mayor, I have a couple of questions. I don't know if you want me to do that after second.
Sorry, I
reading.
didn't see your hand go up. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm just curious about some of the bigger changes. So it looks like development permits for a couple of different types of construction are going up from $1,000 to $2,500. So I don't know if you can comment on that at all. That's in development fees 2A.
Through the chair, Councillor Jolly, I cannot comment on that. I don't know if I have anyone here from planning and development that can speak to that.
Yeah, that would certainly be planning and development. I do not believe we have Adrian online, so I will default to one of our managing directors.
Adrian, I asked Adrian to step on. He might be on shortly, but what I can share is that they've looked at market, they've looked at regionally, and these fees are in line with what they're seeing is reasonable in the market.
Okay, and would you say that's the same for, it looks like the urban design review fee is going from 3,200 to 5,000. MDP amendment is going from 2,200 to 6,000. Would that be the same for all of those?
That is my understanding, but we can take that as information and I can get back to you for sure on that with Adrian.
Okay. My next question is about the all facility summer city pass. Am I reading that correctly that it's decreasing by about 40%?
Which one was that?
That's the like swim pass for the summertime.
Okay.
And I know we do have our director of Rec and Parks, Danielle Podlubny, online, so I'll defer to her.
Through the chair to Councillor Jolly, if you could just give me 1 minute, I'll pull that up and be able to respond to you. Just hang on 2 seconds. I'll come back.
And I guess my last question is probably an easy one. I see Louise is on the line. The rain barrel program, am I reading it correctly that it's been discontinued?
That's what I read too. Yep.
I believe you are indeed reading that correctly. Councillor.
Okay.
Do you want to ask why?
Yeah.
In that case, I will ask Louise Stewart to chime in, please.
Yeah, just trying to turn on the camera. There we go. Actually, I believe I'm going to have to turn that over to environment because that's not a program that we actually operate from within public operations.
So we do have Melissa Logan online. Melissa, are you able to provide some context?
Hi, everybody. This is going to be a case of pass the buck. But this is-
Exactly.
yeah. This is actually Peyton and Megan's department. I have nothing to do with William Barrel, so I know Megan was tuning in today. Let me just send her a quick message. My apologies.
In the meantime, Your Worship, Adrian Slate, Director of Planning and Engineering, is now online and
Okay,
should
go
be able
back to
to
the
address
first question.
Councillor Jolly's first questions.
Thank you. Adrian, did you want me to repeat the question?
I will need that repeated. Yes, please.
So I'm just wondering about the development permits for a couple of different types of new construction. So that's under development fees 2A. It's going from 1,000 to 2,500. And then something similar, the urban design review fee is going from 500 to 5,000, and the MDP amendment fee is going from 2,200 to 6,000. So I'm just wondering about the reasons for those.
I'll start with the ASP or the NDP amendment question, Councillor Jolly. So I guess basically what we've looked at is the amount of time that it's taken us to actually enact those amendments. And we felt that the fee that we were charging was substantially light, that we were not covering the costs of the work that was going into those. So hence the recommendation for the fairly substantial increase. And we did compare ourselves with some regional municipalities, and we're not the top, we're not the bottom either with the new proposed fee.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then what were the other questions? Which fees were the other ones?
Urban design review fee. I assume it was the same
Yeah.
kind of idea. It was going from 3,200 to 5,000. And
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So what we did find was in some cases, the urban design review, if it was a smaller project, it was actually less than the fee that we, the actual cost of that design review was less than the fee we were charging.
Okay.
And in some cases, if it was more complex review or multiple building kind of a thing, it was falling short. So what we found was around close to 5,000 was our max that we were seeing. So we thought on a per building basis, if we just do a pass through of whatever those costs are, then that's fair to development industry, and it also covers taxpayers from a liability perspective for paying for the cost of development. So that was that fee.
okay, that's great. And
then-
then it was just the DPs, which I assume it was the same idea.
Yeah, well, I guess all of our fees, we just increased cost of inflation just to keep up with our operating and purchasing powers, so to speak. Yeah, I don't think there's anything that was a really big standout.
Yeah, just one of them was going from $1,004 to $2,500 for just a couple of types. So that was.
Yeah, it would have been the same thing where we were seeing that but some of the work that we're seeing is taking substantially longer than it used to. And so again, we're trying to cover costs, and we did kind of some, rough assumptions on amount of time that it's taking and staff costs. And then we said, well, our fees should really be X instead of Y or vice versa.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
And before you run away, Adrian, and for those of you that weren't at the convention last week, the premier was on stage and pointed out St. Albert as a pillar in development approval timing. I don't know if it was a recent report because it came up with Minister Nixon as well, but made me feel good that the premier did a shout out to St. Albert for our zero red tape. So that was congratulations to your staff.
Thank you. And we're still working on process improvement things, and we've got a request that we can utilize to even speed things up even better. So
Perfect.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks. All right, who else has questions? Oh, you had a couple more.
We do have, I believe, Danielle now is back with an answer, and we also
Okay,
have Megan
yeah, her
Myers
hand's
on
up.
for the
Yep.
Rainbarrel question.
Through the chair to Councillor Jolly. So basically it's I think more of a clerical catch up. So we used to sell the all season summer pass as a seasonal pass, but now we're selling it as a monthly pass based on some feedback of residents that they thought it was easier to buy 1 month. That way, if they were going on holidays or whatever. So it's kind of an optics issue where it's actually seeing a slight increase.
Okay.
But we're splitting it over 2 months instead of
that makes way more sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and what about rain barrels? Anyone have an answer?
Megan Myers is now online.
Hi, Megan.
All right, Megan, did you get the question?
No, what is the question?
I saw that we're discontinuing the rain barrel program, and my question was why.
So I believe it was taken out of the policy, but it's not actually, like, the program itself is not being discontinued.
Okay, if the program's not being discontinued, do we need to have that rate in our master fees bylaw?
I don't believe so, as we've partnered now with a local business in order to run the program. So the fee is not set by us anymore.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That makes sense. Cool. I'm glad we still can get rain barrels. All right, Councilor McKay, you have a question?
Yeah, it came to mind with when Danielle was online. I don't know if she's still there or not.
Danielle, is still there? There she is. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just in relation to the kind of some of the fee schedules and then kind of a comment from Councillor Jolly. Do we track actual numbers and are they available? Like do we know how many senior passes we have? Do we know how many annual passes we have?
To the chair, to Councillor McKay, music to my ears. We absolutely can give you all that data. I have some data specifically on senior passes today, just because that was related to the motion. But if council would ever like some more information on our current membership composition, that's always something we can provide.
Yeah, I think that would be probably good. It might even be good in the annual report that we're supposed to get back on Service Place, just numbers and things like that. But I'll wait actually in relation to the motion further on.
All right, can I get someone to do second reading? If there's no more questions. We did first reading a couple months ago. Sorry, Councillor Killick, your name was there. Go ahead.
That bylaw 17/2023 being a bylaw to amend the master rates bylaw and various other bylaws under which fees, rates, and charges are set be read a second time.
All right, thank you for that. Accept that. Any comments?
I think just based on the low number of questions and the direct answers that were provided to the questions, it's fairly straightforward to move it forward.
All right, anyone else? Seeing nothing, I'll call for the vote. Motion voting is closed. The motion passes unanimously. Now, staff had proposed one small amendment to Schedule F. Do you want to read that one in, Councillor Killick?
Sure.
Motion number 2.
Thank you. That bylaw 17/2023 be amended by deleting Schedule F and replacing it with Schedule F attached to the agenda report entitled Bylaws/Policies that affect fees and charges, bylaw 17/2023 and C-FS-16 second and third readings.
All right, any comments on that one?
No, nothing
Okay.
to add.
All right, call for the vote. Voting is closed. And that passes unanimously. Can I bother you to do third reading, Councillor Killick?
Yep, thank you. That bylaw 17/2023 be read a third and final time as amended.
Awesome.
Nothing more to add, Madam Mayor.
Call for the vote. Voting is closed. And that passes unanimously. All right, Councillor Killick, you have a motion. I'll get you to read it.
That policy C-FS-16 municipal fees and charges be amended to delete section 2F from Schedule 14.
All right, and what does Schedule 2F read again, page 1?
That is, Madam Mayor, to delete the wording that said maximum price a customer is willing to pay per hour of use for
Right.
electric car charging
Okay.
stations.
And Mr. Fletcher, your staff agreed with that change?
That's
Sounded
correct,
like
Your Worship.
in the background. Okay. All right, Councillor Hughes has a question on that one.
Thank you. So when I read that, it says in the background that it provides more elasticity, and I'm trying to figure out how does it provide more elasticity when saying the maximum willing to pay seems to imply more than just taking that out.
Are you directing that to Councillor Killick?
No, I'm asking it to staff.
Staff, okay.
Yeah, I think it essentially removes a constraint and opens it up is the simple answer to it.
It's not dictated to.
I guess, okay, because it just, why would we ever charge more than customers willing to pay? Because then you get no business. So that's why I'm trying to figure out. Maybe I'll ask to Councillor Killick, what was your intention behind that?
Thank you. The thought process was, first off, the first 4 criteria already gives lots of leeway within administration to adjust the rates. The 4th item specifically that would remain would be benchmarking it to others. So we don't want to set a rate in, say, in Alberta of $5 where every other charger in the region is set at $2.50. The reason for specifically asking to delete the maximum price a customer is willing to pay is I haven't seen that language used in any other fee setting structure. Like I'm only willing to pay $2 for my seniors pass to go to the pool, or I'm only willing to pay, $1 to go to the library. So it just seemed to be some language that didn't really fit well for setting rates for the EV chargers. And as the backgrounder said, and as I read the original price setting structure, I think we've already got lots of leeway to adjust prices as it is.
Okay, I think I basically made you do your whole debate in advance, but thank you, I understand now. Okay.
All right, Councillor Killick, I'll accept your motion. What you said might have been your debate, but go ahead. Go ahead if you have anything further.
Just simply to say that I think the way the administration backgrounder positioned it and explained it is very good. And the whole idea is to continue to have flexibility, but also to benchmark. Key thing I think in anything is benchmarking where we fit in the region, and that is contained there. So I think we're good to remove this particular wording.
All right, anyone else on debate? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Voting's closed, and that passes unanimously. Councillor Bermansky, I'll get you to read in your proposed motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through the mayor to administration, that the fee for service place seniors annual membership be amended from the proposed $460 to $450.
All right, before I accept that, is there any questions? Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, I guess the question isn't to Councillor Bermansky. I kind of understand where you're coming from. I guess I just need some clarity from administration, and I imagine it'll come from Danielle again. So I'll jump right to Danielle. Hello. You should change your screen between now and when I talked to you last. I'm looking at the schedule that's for the user fees at Service Credit Union Place. I mean, I just, maybe this is behind Councillor Bermansky's motion. There just doesn't seem to be an alignment in relation to how the fees seem to jump from a youth, a student, an adult, and then into the senior. I mean, my very limited math skills show, like, I mean, usually it's about a $15 increase in relation to a child or a youth, and yet seniors for an annual pass is $30. So can you explain the alignment, or how? I mean, I know in the backgrounder you tried to explain it, but can you kind of go over that a little bit more? Because I don't know, I just didn't see how one was 15 and then the other one was 30.
Through the chair to Councillor Mackay, are you meaning the increases to the fees? Okay.
Yeah,
So
I'm nodding my head thinking you're in the room, but yes, that's what I mean.
I can see you, I gotcha. So through the chair to Councillor Mackay, when administration does this review annually, we use the policy as what sets our guidance for how we create the fees. So it's using community need and feedback, market research, financial impact of the specific use and marketability. So really where the relationship is between when you have a senior's annual pass, there's a relationship to what a monthly pass costs. It's on the senior spectrum, but really we do that review independent. So the seniors pass, we go and do the regional review on what a senior's pass costs at similar type rec facilities in the region, and then have that discussion as well as the adults. We do it independent of each other based on the individual kind of categories that we have. Does that give you better clarity?
Yeah, so my interpretation of what was in the background is then there would be even though you're saying right now that they're independent, you're saying that if this motion passes and we end up changing it, or then it would impact all the other ones.
It impacts the other senior rates, correct?
Yeah, so I mean, if they're all reviewed through an independent process, where's the alignment with that?
So when we do the review, we do that. We take into factor all those considerations. It's more of an art than a science, I would say, because we don't have exact same facilities and the exact same rates on every facility. But we look to make sure we're kind of within the realm. We're on the middle to the higher end of the spectrum. So we keep in alignment with our policy, and that is how we do the review. But we do it on each line item, and so there is a relationship when we build the fees out, but based on the age demographic, not relation adult to senior or the like or the versus. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does, but I guess maybe I'm not explaining my question. So what I'm wondering, I mean, if the motion in front of us passes, the backgrounder said that then all the other numbers would also have to be impacted and would decrease as well. I don't, based on what it was just explained to me, I don't see the synergy there.
Okay, I appreciate where you're coming from. So I guess when we set all the fees, we do have this rationale as well in mind that like I said, it's an art, not a science. So it's kind of more, we get the fees, we build the structure out, and then in the relationship between the seniors' fees, we find that happy relationship of the annual passes maybe worth 10 months of a monthly pass. Like we build that out into our math, I guess, the equations in terms of how we develop those fees. So that kind of sets the path forward, but we use the regional scanning as one of our inputs. That is what sets the kind of tone.
But I think if I understand correctly what you're asking, Councillor, it's, the motion was specifically for the annual membership. So why are all the other senior related charges changing? So accepting that only the seniors ones are being looked at, why are they even being looked at beyond the wording that was in the original motion? Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thanks for the clarity. I've got you.
That's why, I guess that's what is there an answer to that then in relation to that?
So I guess it's administration's best recommendation that if we make the change to the seniors annual pass, that we would make the consequential changes that keep our math intact. It is the discretion of council. If you'd like us to just make the one change to the annual membership, that certainly is something we can do. But in our current configuration, these would be the impacts if we were to use the typical math equations that we do to calculate it. This is the total impact. To your point, if council wants to provide direction, we can just make the one change.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. So I have one more question and relates to counts, and we're talking about the very, very popular track amount. And do we know how many seniors actually access that? Do you have that information handy, or do you need me to take it away as an IR?
Through the chair to Councillor Mackay, I can provide you that today. So so just to give you some rough numbers, if you want, on the seniors membership, in 2019, pre-pandemic, we had 1,346 members. That was both monthly and annual for seniors. And in 2023, we recovered to 1,133 members. So we're still increasing and showing an upward incline to reach that pre-pandemic level. At the current state, 114 are track memberships only, and the remaining 1,019 are for the full facility.
And the reason for the increase in that is separate again entirely because there are a lot of facilities in the region that don't have tracks or whatever. So how is that just inflation, or how did you arrive at that?
Again, we use kind of, to your point, it's an art, it's not a science, but we use derivatives of the annual rate to create all of those kind of subsequent rates, and that's where that kind of flow happens on that scale, because not all facilities have the same rates, to your point. or the same amenities even.
All right, thank you. I think I got clarity here.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So you said that if council would like to just have that one fee changed, that you just recall council directions. So my question is the wording as it's written, because that's how I would interpret it, is just the one fee? Is that how, unless you have to say that only the fee, or is just the words as it's being done for Councillor Bramanski to bring forward, will be interpreted as just that one item?
That's correct, Councillor Hughes. It will be interpreted as just changing the one item. I'm
just the one item.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we get the wording correct before it comes forward, so we don't have any misinterpretations, because the backgrounders seem to interpret it differently. Okay, thank you.
And then just to make sure, in the report, it said would result in an annual of $12,000 loss in revenue. Is that number still correct?
Through the chair through the chair, I guess you are the chair. That number would actually be reduced because that was based on all of those numbers being included. We would see less than a $12,000 impact to the facility if it was just on the annual.
Okay. All right, making sure we got all the information. Councillor Jolly, you're good? Okay, I will accept your motion. Councillor Bramanski, go ahead.
Thank you. And through the mayor, it was an assumption of mine, because the way it's calculated in all the different fee schedules, that it's a breakdown of each fee schedule below. So if I need to amend it to include all of those, I will do so. But the intent of bringing the motion forward was that all other general fees were raised by 4.5%. Whereas the seniors was changed by 7%. And we wouldn't do a tax increase for, half the people, and a greater tax increase for the other half of people. And plus I'm very grateful that our seniors membership is growing in St. Albert. It's not quite to where it was before the pandemic, but we need to honor that social, physical, and mental need of our seniors, and to penalize them in a fee increase in comparison to the rest of citizens, I see as an injustice, and should just be regulated to keep everything equal amongst all citizens.
Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. Just really briefly, my everyday work is talking about the importance of recreation for seniors. So I definitely see how that's very important. I'm opposing this motion because it's really the definition of getting into the weeds. I trust administration to do these calculations based on the policies that council sets, and they have done that. And I'm happy to stay with their recommendations that are based on kind of the governance decisions of council. Thank you.
Councillor Brahe, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too tend to rely on the administrative process of arriving at certain fees and charges. However, I do need some clarity. So Councillor Hughes asked earlier about the way that the motion is currently written, that it would be only the annual fee, and yet the intent of the mover is that all of the seniors.
No.
Isn't that what she just said?
I had mentioned that the understanding is in all of the fees, it's calculated the same way at Service Place. So it made common sense that it would be changed.
All four? Okay, now I'm confused.
See, that's
Yeah,
what I
okay.
heard. So I just need some clarity there.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I believe that's why the AR is reflected as it is, and based on the conversation, I believe, won't put words in it, but our understanding was that in making the motion, that not only would the annual membership change, but then the derivatives of all that other list and the table you'll find in the administrative review would change it as well. I believe that was our understanding of the intent.
So the motion is not worded well.
So currently the motion as it stands would only change the annual rate.
Right.
It would have to be altered slightly to achieve the intent.
Okay, so I'm going to look to you one more time. What is the intention, Councillor Mancy? Because your motion does not read, I think, what your intent.
Right,
Yeah.
but I did mention I would be willing to amend it for clarification for administration.
So if I may request a 5-minute recess, just to make sure that if the intention of the motion is to make sure that we change not just the senior annual membership rate, but also the additional senior annual membership rate and the senior monthly membership rate, and the senior track only, like if we're intending to change all of those, then I would request a 5-minute recess just to get the wording of the motion tightened up so that it's clear that we're changing all of them instead of just the senior annual membership fee.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll give you 5 minutes.
Thank you.
So I had already accepted the motion, so it is now owned by council. So
I'm prepared to put forward a friendly as to whatever has been discussed as an possible amendment, Mayor.
Yes, that will work from a procedural perspective if it's friendly. So the wording should be up on the screen shortly.
Here's something else I learned on Tuesday, Marta. Because council now owns the motion, one person can't change it, right?
That's true. And so from procedurally, what we need to do is amend the main motion on the floor to add the wording that we've proposed. So that's the proper way to do it.
We can do it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna be your worst nightmare now that I took that class. So the reason I'm saying that is we were told never to use friendly motions ever in council, because once I accepted the motion, it no longer belongs to Councilor Romansky. It belongs to this body to debate. So just Sheena can't change it. And if you think about it, if we didn't agree with that change, and all of a sudden that's the change, so we have to debate it, which is fine. But so the amending motion is that.
So I'll do a motion that the current motion is replace the following words.
Good.
That the fee for service place seniors annual membership is amended from the proposed $460 to $450 and subsequently. So I guess we could just say we add on to the end of the motion if you like to, or either way, all other seniors fees at service place affected by this change be adjusted accordingly.
Okay. All right. Accept that amending motion. Councilor Hughes, go ahead.
Okay.
Just pass it off to Shelley if you want to.
You know, I'll just talk to him briefly. The intention of this is just that apparently Councillor Bermansky's intention of the motion was this exact type of wordage. So I'm just bringing it forward so that we can debate the intention of the original motion, even though it kind of slipped through on the other way.
Thank you. Anyone else on the amending motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Oh, Councillor Hughes, go ahead. Or sorry, Bermansky, go ahead. Oh, this is on the amending motion. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just.
Nothing? Oh, okay, sorry. Mike, is this on the amending motion?
So excited to jump in here on the amending motion. Yes, Madam Mayor. It now seems we are, to Councillor Jolly's point, we are now really getting into the weeds. And while the original motion was nice and clean and one specific item, now we're cascading it down into very small pieces. And I really struggle with that. I also think that when I heard from administration several times saying this is a kind of an art more than a science, there is no mathematical correlation directly that needs to take place. It could, but it doesn't need to. And while I was looking at the original intent and the way it was clearly written, that was nice and clean. And now we seem to be really getting into the fine minutia of this, and that's where I'm having trouble supporting it.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Bermansky.
Thank you. I have to disagree that it's getting into the minutia of things, because all of our fees are calculated exactly the same way. And I didn't see that there, initially would have been a purpose to even bring all the additional wording there, because each annual fee is calculated in the same means. If it goes up 7.5 from the top, 7% from the top, it just calculates downwards. It will do the same on the new adult memberships and every other membership that's there. So it's just essentially being divided between the time of usage. So my intent is not to direct administration, to whether it's, 10 cents here or 5 cents here or whatever. I'm just giving them the ability to calculate like they would always do in all the other memberships. And again, the main point is not penalizing seniors to a greater level than every other citizen in the city for a membership for health and well-being. And that's the stand for me. Thank you.
Councillor Mackay.
I heard something different from administration in the sense that, and I think it was pointed out by Councillor Killick when he talked about the fact that there is some art. It's not a clear mathematical formula, because otherwise you would, I think then it would be fairly easy to set a rate and then just figure out applicable rates based on algorithm. But what I heard administration repeatedly say is that it's far more than just a financial algorithm. So like Councillor Killick, I could see the rationale and behind the seasons pass, but because I know the needs. I mean, as a senior and as someone who uses a facility, I know how well used it is. And if I thought it was being unfair just based on an algorithm, then I couldn't support what the city was doing, and I would be 100% behind this. So I mean, I'm the change has right now changed my opinion pending any final arguments.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Struggling with this too, but in the end, it's senior or adult rate went up 5% and seniors went up 7%. And so if you don't think our seniors recognize that and see that, then I think we're mistaken. Now they'll see that. Problem is it's $5, but for many $5 means something, I guess. So I think there's rationale and if we're going to raise rates, we raise it consistently. I don't know how I'm going to vote on this because in the end, we are in the weeds, deeply in the weeds. But in any case, there's a reason to make the motion. So I'll see how I vote at the end. Thanks.
Councillor Hughes, it's your amending motion, I think, to close.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to speak on this. So the reality is that council approves the rates. Every single number in this document, we take responsibility for that final decision. So if we have a problem with the rates, it's our responsibility at the time of the approval to make those changes. And that's what's happening today. So as far as going to the weeds, this is just about Councillor Bermansky found an inequity between how much seniors are being charged across the board for an increase versus
Just on the amendment motion.
I know, but that's what this is. And so this is about just recognizing that if we just change one, then we are not actually recognizing the fact that all the rates were increased by 7%, not just the one rate. So this is simply about making sure that if whatever we choose to vote on in the end, this is just about allowing us to vote on the full package and recognize that the full package has changed by 7% versus 5.4 for the rest of the population. And so if we do choose to vote in favor or not in favor in the end, we're at least voting on the entire situation. Because really this is about, yes, it's changing multiple numbers, but it's because there's a cascading effect. But, you know, it's not getting into the weeds. We are being asked to approve every single number here. And that is what we have to do. And if we have a challenge with it, this is our responsibility to speak about it today. That's it. Thank you.
Call for the vote. Voting's closed. And that motion passes with Councillor Mackay opposed. We're back to the main motion. Councillor Bermansky, any opening comments?
I don't think I have any more comments. I mean, everybody pretty much knows where I stand there. I'm just trying to make it fair and equitable and, you know, and be gracious to our seniors. So yeah, thank you.
Anyone else on debate? All right, call for the vote. Oh, Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, and initially I was thinking we just needed the one line item as well. But then I come to realize that the intention behind the motion is Councillor Romanski, as we learned with the amendment, was because the inequity was not just on one line item, but on multiple. So if we're going to make a correction, we should just do it right. And I have a difficult time talking to somebody in our community when seniors are often so strapped, who are trying to make something to keep themselves healthy and to be in the community, and then tell them that they have to pay a higher proportion of an increase than everyone else because of an art. No. So in my opinion, we need to actually recognize the fact that if we're going to make changes, they should be equal across the board. And that we can't put additional due hardship on somebody just because they happen to be a senior and they also want to use our facilities. So I'll be supporting this.
Anyone else? Okay, call for the vote. Voting's closed. And that passes by majority with Councillor Jolly opposed. We are now on to. Yes. I think passed on consent. The motion was that the City of St. Albert sponsor a Christmas tree in the 2023 St. Albert Sturgeon Hospice Association Christmas tree light up program for $1,000 to be funded from the council contingency budget. And then now we are on to Councillor Jolly's motion, which I'll get you to read into the record, and then we'll go into questions.
So I'm just bringing that up. That administration present to council not later than Q2 2024 such new or amended bylaw provisions, policies, or other documents as in the opinion of administration may be required or advisable to allow residential landowners a wider scope of permissible vegetation and landscaping options on their properties, including front and side yards, than is currently allowed under the community standards bylaw, including alternatives such as food crops, pollinating gardens, rain gardens, and xeriscaping. Excuse me. Try to finish that and to encourage I guess I wanted to ask a question about that second part before I read it in.
Sure.
So administration wrote this kind of based on my intent, but it sounds like from the backgrounder that second part maybe not required. I don't know if anyone can comment on that.
Like the whole second motion?
Yeah, the number 2.
Encourage the developers. Okay.
Yeah, that was just recommended to me, but
I don't know who wrote the report, but Mr. Fletcher, do we need the second part?
So I will ask Donnie George with engineering to comment on that particular piece based on the interface with the development community. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Donnie, for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through the chair to Councillor Jolly. Yes, in the background, it kind of suggests that we cannot really influence the developers in making changes, but it totally depends on the developers, I would say architectural controls in terms of what they can dictate, and they have their own restrictive covenants and whatnot. From a general perspective, I would encourage you to leave it in and let administration explore further as part of responding to this council motion should it pass.
To leave it in. Okay.
That's what I would recommend, yeah.
Okay, so I'll keep going, Mayor. So to encourage developers of new subdivisions to create development concepts that will similarly allow new purchasers of their residential lots a wider scope of vegetation and landscaping options, consistent with landowners' responsibility to comply with the requirements of the Weed Control Act and Weed Control Regulation, that noxious weeds must be controlled and prohibited noxious weeds must be destroyed, and with the requirements of landowners and occupiers set out in the city's surface drainage bylaw.
Someday you should become an auctioneer, Councillor Jolly. Well done. Okay, before I accept it, I will open up for questions. Councillor Mackay, you hitting it off.
Yeah. Let's see if we can mull right through this.
You've been working on that for a while, haven't you?
No, it just came to me. So in the one paragraph, and I just seek clarification from administration. So these methods do not incorporate grass or weeds that are longer than 15 centimeters is that I think that's what we currently have. So does this include like those ornamental grasses that you see? I'm not sure. I'm not a horticulturist. I'm not sure what the names are, but I see quite a proliferation of these ornamental grasses that are certainly higher than 15 centimeters.
Yeah.
So is there clarity required, or is that just something that is understood by administration?
Perhaps I'll ask Mr. Aaron Giesbrecht to sort of owns the enforcement and the standards component to begin, and he can throw that. As I'm sure you can appreciate, there's an environmental nexus, an enforcement nexus, an engineering standards nexus, and in fact, a legal nexus from the bylaw component on this.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Mackay. So ornamental grasses is one of the pieces of vegetation that wasn't originally contemplated when the community standards bylaw was originally passed. So that is something that administration does have plans, regardless of how this motion goes, to bring forward to council some clarity around what kind of grasses would be permitted. Currently, the bylaw says any grass that's over 15 centimeters has to be cut, but I can tell you that from a practical and reasonable perspective and enforcement, we don't enforce ornamental grasses past that 15 centimeters. So if they are 2 feet high, that's something that is acceptable, provided that the totality of the property is not in a state of disrepair or lack of maintenance.
So while I have you, from an enforcement perspective, what's all, can you walk me through? So you get a complaint of a potentially unkept yard that has weeds or potentially noxious weeds or clover or something like that. Walk me through what you do. Do you have engage with environmental? Do you engage with other people? Or, I mean, you're not going to just send an MES officer up there and use his or her expertise to say that's not allowed and cut it? Or walk me through your process.
No problem. Thank you. So yes, actually, when a community standards complaint does come in, the first initial step is for a municipal enforcement officer to go on site and to see if that officer does believe there to be some kind of infraction under the community standards bylaw or a weed control act. Those are the two pieces of legislation that they'll be looking at. Typically would not engage with environment or other departments unless there was some unique circumstance that was happening at that particular location where we needed some other expertise or advice. But the engagement with the property owner is first and foremost if the officer believes there to be a violation, and then if there is, then there's direction that's provided. These are the things that you need to do in order to comply, to become in compliance with the bylaw. If that's failed and that didn't happen by the deadline, then the officer often will extend that if there's extenuating circumstances, or if they believe that a ticket is worthy afterwards, then a fine ends up getting issued to that property owner. And in a worst case scenario, if the ticket that gets issued doesn't change the behavior or change the condition of the property, we do have abilities under the Municipal Government Act to go onto the property and take action and cut the property and have expenses billed through taxes, but those are pretty extreme situations.
So can you, how many charges have we had last year?
I don't have those exact numbers with me today, but I can share that it's pretty rare for community standards tickets to be issued. Typically, the interaction with the officer and the time frame that's given, compliance is maintained. The fine is fairly hefty. I believe it's $1,000. So when property owners see the potential fine of $1,000 versus coming into compliance, more often than not, coming into compliance is the approach that they take.
Thank you. Just one more question. I don't know who this is to then. So if this passes, so potentially would this allow a resident to plant a normal garden in their front yard or their side yard?
You mean like a vegetable garden?
Yeah, like a normal garden, like with corn or potatoes or
I remember seeing a TED Talk with Jim Hole, and he was encouraging everyone to put a 4-by-4 carrot garden in his front yard. Anyway, yeah, but that's a good question.
I'm just wondering if this would allow just basically free reign on gardens in the front yard.
Well, I think the nature of the motion is that we would come back with the parameters. So I certainly think that would likely be part of the discussion. Whether or not it came back as administration's presentation is another thing entirely. The motion itself, I think, is specific to what, but yes, that would be part of the discussion.
Okay. All right. Just questions I have.
Yeah, it's good. All right, I'm moving on to Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to confirm, I see and Councillor Jolly read in Q2 of 2024. Then the package says Q4 of 2023. It's Q2 of 2024, correct?
Yeah, administration recommended that, so I made the change.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate the heart behind the motion, and I guess the real,
Not quite into debate yet.
no.
Okay,
I
sorry.
understand.
You usually start off with that.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So my question really is that as we contemplate this in 2024, will administration come forward as part of their recommendation, some sort of mechanism to allow us to understand how the community standards bylaw will be interpreted, so that when residents come and talk to us about these sorts of things, that their neighbor is doing X and the neighbor says, well, now I just want to know that there will be some tools for us to be able to interpret whatever is being proposed. Is that part of what anticipated come forward?
Absolutely. Communications and education would be a big component of any significant alterations, and then there would be a strategy not only to arm you as council with the required information, but to communicate to residents as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Because what for one person is beauty, another person's is a weed, lawn going to weed, right? So anyway.
All right, Councillor Bermansky.
Thank you, through the mayor. My question is regarding bylaw enforcement. Noxious weeds, most people, and the good majority of people probably wouldn't recognize them. How long do you only get complaints to actually look into that? You don't have bylaw ever really looking for those types of things. So it would have to be a neighbor policing before bylaw would come out.
I will ask Karen Giesbrecht to weigh in on that.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bermansky. So right now, the unit does not do proactive enforcement of noxious weeds unless it would be rare, I guess, if the officer is driving by a field and they see a bunch of scentless chamomile, as an example, they may proactively send a notice to that developer or that landowner to remove that particular weed, especially if it's been one that they've seen in the past and challenges with enforcement. But typically, any community standards bylaw is a complaint-based first step. We wait for the residents to contact us about it. The other potential is that we do have some properties that have been in non-compliance year after year. And in those particular cases, we do proactively address those properties rather than waiting for a neighbor to contact us.
So then you're saying there's properties that have been a problem for ongoing number of years already?
That is correct. There are some properties where our community standards, we get a number of community standards complaint year after year. And it may not be the exact same issue. It may be, it's garbage one day, it gets cleaned up and then it gets to a state of disrepair again, where we have to go to a few months later and deal with that property owner again.
Okay, and I have one other question. Sorry, I don't think it's for bylaw, probably for your environmental group or whatever. Like, say there is a specific, outbreak of some type of weed in someone's yard with good intent. How long would it take to spread throughout the neighborhood that it could require a fairly large cleanup?
I believe we've got Melissa Logan online. I'll defer to her to start.
Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Bermansky. Public operations are actually quite active in monitoring invasive weed populations in the city. And we do have education door knockers. So if they see weeds on private property, they will make a note on the door knocker and leave it on the door and say, you've got this weed in your backyard. Obviously, how quickly something would spread would depend entirely upon what species we're talking about. But like I said, our public operations staff really have their eyes on the ground, and we have a good idea, generally speaking, of where our big areas of problem weeds are.
Okay, but that would likely expand if it was on several yards in the city, I would suppose. So
yes, if they were ignored, yes.
Thank you. That's all the questions.
Councillor Killick.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the work of coming back and bring something back. Would taking almost 6 months of work to bring back the amendments. That's what we're really debating here, correct? We're not agreeing to anything except go away and make a plan.
That's correct, Councilor.
Yeah. So in that sense, then dandelion is not a noxious weed. It's a pollinating, good pollinator, one of the earliest ones that come out in the spring. But the challenge is that when they sprout out to spread their seeds, they shoot up, the flower stem shoots up more than 6 inches and it goes to seed, and the seeds blow all over the place from, different neighbors that may like dandelions to neighbors that don't like dandelions. It would that, as it's not a noxious weed, would that be potentially allowed in the future bylaw?
I will ask anybody to chime in, go ahead, Mr. Giesbrecht, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I could take that question. So dandelions, as right now, as it stands today, it's considered a weed, so it would have to stay under 15 centimeters. So if council so choose, though, in the future amendment of a community standards bylaw, they can we could define weed and exclude dandelion if that was council's choice, where that dandelions would then be allowed to grow further than 15 centimeters. But as of today, and as the standard right now is, it's that 15 centimeter rule. But it is not a noxious or restricted weed in the province. If council selected that as the community standard, that dandelions are permitted, then that could happen in the bylaw.
It's similar question that neighbor might like to have clover in their yard. Again, a good pollinator. Clover typically doesn't grow over, the 15 centimeters or 6 inches, but it cannot be contained to one person's yard.
Yeah.
So you end up, how would that be addressed in the future bylaw?
I think you're jumping the gun. I think we need to see what they would propose, and part of what they would bring back was maybe how we would address that.
Yeah.
But I think before we even give them permission, I don't even think Aaron's thought about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get a sense of, is this a bunch of work that it's a lot of work that is going to lead us to a point where council is either, number one, presented with something that isn't going to be agreeable to the vast majority of residents. And that's what I'm trying to represent, is some vast majority of residents, and something that then would get us into a situation where, as Councillor Mackay said, all of a sudden he has to become I don't know what the word was, but horticologist, or that I guess it's the same question as food crop. Could I grow canola in my front yard? Canola is not a noxious weed. It's a food, and yet it spreads like wildfire and cannot be controlled. We see it growing in our sidewalks, our boulevards, our crooks and crannies of parking lots.
Mayor, apologies. Are we in debate right now?
He's struggling with.
Yeah,
I think what I'm telling you, Councillor Kulik, is Aaron can't answer that question yet. You sort of are getting debate because you're talking about the consequences, but that might even be, I think what you're trying to get at is amount of time that we're going to spend.
So
is that what you're kind of driving?
That's what I'm trying to get at, is like,
is there a question around that though? Because I think it was in the background that they actually changed the date.
They're changing the date.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
what I'm trying to get at is the amount of time and work and effort that we're going to ask people to go away and do to bring back something that potentially would.
So it sounds like you're in debate. Is there a question about the time and effort?
How much time and effort?
Sure, yeah, that's
like
fine.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate, I am struggling here a little bit. I
That's
appreciate
okay.
that. So by bumping it to Q2, there are many other high priority things that would be looked at. Is this a large chunk of work? How many hours would be required to actually set aside and do this work? Saying we can only slot it in 6 months, or is it going to be a lot of work to come back with a level of detail that we've talked about to get it back on the agenda in Q2 2024?
So Councillor, I cannot give you a number of hours in terms of our estimate. It's not there. Obviously, the extension was asked for to provide enough space, not only to mitigate the capacity concerns, but also to ensure that it was done properly and not rushed and pigeonholed. I will ask perhaps Mr. Giesbrecht or Ms. Logan if they've got any comments. I know that they've been a little bit more intimately involved in the look and what this will take.
Yeah.
I think what I could add, Councillor, is there may be like administration has to bring back the community standards bylaw back to council at some point anyways to clarify things such as ornamental grasses and likely the definition of weed. So the definition of grass, the definition of weed, and just get some clarity as to what council would like to see in terms of that, so that it's not left up to too much interpretation where there's questions on interpretation. So those are, I would argue that there are probably some quick wins on the amount of time that it requires to do that. A little bit of research and then bringing forward that motion, I think, is easily done within 6 months. I think some of the more challenging things will be council's debate on exactly what they want to be to have as a weed, or what to allow and what not to allow. And I think a lot of that will come after that initial assessment meeting. Here's what we're thinking in terms of how to do this. And then council may want to go down a more detailed path, which then could take us a little bit longer before actual amendments happen. But that's the way I would see that getting framed up, if that makes sense. And I'll leave it to Ms. Logan or George to add anything in from their side.
That's okay. You've answered my question, I think. Thank you.
Aaron, before I go to Councillor Romansky, I feel like the community standards bylaw has been on the work plan since last term. And it's been pushed off a few times for other reasons. Where is it landing in a complete overhaul? Because it's pretty old. Okay.
I mean, it's obviously there's a desire to have that additional clarity, and then I can leave that to Mr. Giesbrecht. It is not super high on the list of things to do right now.
It's a conversation maybe we should have at strat planning. I feel like the community standards bylaw, if I looked at it, it's probably 10 years old. Am I guessing right there? So we'll talk about it at strat planning, maybe see if that's a priority for us to push forward. So this would just be a small piece of the community standards bylaw that would be looked at if this passes, right? Well, the community standards bylaw is huge, right?
Yeah, and again, I think the holistic overview of the garbage.
All that.
There's much more than simply lawn, right, or the growing areas, and certainly Mr. Giesbrecht can confirm or deny that, but that's a significant amount of effort. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Romansky, then Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. I have one more environmental question, whoever may be able to answer this for me. Most developers for a long time now have been using lawns, and I mean, that's a standard in most cities. Could you tell me if that helps in flood mitigation and capture of sediment and stuff from going into our sewer system better than anything else?
I will speak to that one to start off. Thank you for the question, Councillor Bermansky. So the typical grass species used for front lawns is Kentucky bluegrass. Kentucky bluegrass has an extremely shallow root system and actually barely penetrates the soil profile. So it is, I would say, only nominally above pavement when it comes to mitigating flood and sediment deposition.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, from what I understand, front yard fruit and vegetable gardens are permitted. Is that correct? Like currently?
That is correct, Councillor Jolly. There's nothing that prohibits that under the community standards bylaw. Again, as long as it's maintained and the totality of the yard doesn't put it in that state of disrepair. The only thing I would add to that, though, is developers through their restrictive covenant process in certain developments may have restrictions on gardens in front properties, and that's something that is a civil matter that's between the developer and the property owner themselves that the municipality doesn't get involved in. But strictly community standards bylaw or land use bylaw, a garden would be allowed. Provided, and I'll put one more on there, under the land use bylaw, if it is a massive garden that's above ground, there may be some rules around how close they can be to the utility right away, the sidewalk, or the neighboring property.
Thank you. That's helpful. I think there's some confusion around that.
Thanks for that clarity. Okay, I'm seeing no more questions. I'll accept your motion. Councillor Jolly, go ahead.
Thank you. So I just want to start out with reading straight from our strategic priorities. So we say that council recognizes the need for adapting to a changing natural environment, and our focus will be on exploring innovative ways to reduce our footprint, protect waterways and green spaces, and ensure resilient social systems and infrastructure now and for future generations. So this really touches on all of those points. Councillor Bermansky, that was a wonderful question about the impact of grass on flood mitigation. It's very well known that traditional lawns are really awful in terms of their ability to help with that, and that the more modern systems of natural plantings with deeper root systems are so much better for providing that resiliency in our communities. I also kind of reached out to some communities online about their thoughts about this motion. One person commented that clover is the lawn of the future. So what's really interesting right now is clover is permitted currently within a flower bed. So kind of that concerns about spreading, I guess already exists. Clovers everywhere in our city. So, moving from just a garden to a whole lawn is not going to make that big difference in terms of spreading, but it will make a big difference in terms of kind of resiliency of our stormwater systems, in terms of reduced need for fertilizers, in terms of reduced need for pesticides, that kind of thing. Another comment here was that this person is considering clover in their lawn because it's less work, less waste, better for the bees. There's no need to water, and there's little or no mowing. So they'd love to reduce the amount of work that they're doing in their yard even further. I think everyone knows that this motion really started out when one of our residents, who was trying to do their best to support kind of the world that our grandchildren were inherit, had to raise their clover lawn, and it went from being this beautiful flower covered lawn to, they described it as ugly. And this isn't the first time this has happened in St. Albert. I really hope it's the last. I think we have a real opportunity to kind of follow that direction in our strat plan. And I hope to see some great recommendations coming from administration about how we can support our residents in kind of creating these resilient yard systems. Thank you.
Anyone else on debate? Councillor Romansky?
Thank you. I understand the intent in this motion and, to, I guess, change with the times and try and do something for the environment in the best direction of that. But when I hear comments like people want to do something in their yard because it reduces work, that kind of feel like, makes me think, okay, they're going to just let their yard grow wild kind of thing. And then going back to clover, clover has a very, very strong rooting system. So it will travel, although it doesn't grow the height, it will travel to neighboring yards quite rapidly. But the downside of it is that it doesn't have it's not hardy. So, you can't walk on it like grass, and you have a lot of the season where you have mud. I love gardens, I have my flowers, my garden in my backyard, but as soon as you get a freeze and you've got mushy, sloppy, messy, or you've already harvested your garden, you have not an attractive area there. It's mostly mud and such. So I think that there's a reason why, we have gardens traditionally in backyards. Most people can do all kinds of experiments with something they're learning, a type of planting. You can have a planter in in an area of your yard, a front or side area. It could be a separate planter. But I think to focus on the whole yard and kind of put, like I probably wouldn't want to be backing out my driveway and seeing corn that I have to look or something. It's the whole idea of changing the whole front yard of the whole community is a visual that we would never be able to go back from. So I don't see the intent on spending the administration time and waste on, in calculating what people could do for many things that will be dissension in the community and probably not agreeable with most of the public. The way the policy sits now, I know we do have, policy for how you should upkeep your yard and such, but there are very, very many choices of separate areas that you can do those specific environmental. You can do your bee garden in a specific corner or planter area of the yard without affecting your neighbors and the whole neighborhood. So I think this is just kind of jumping in too deep in the first round of discussing our policy for neighborhood feel and design and management. That's it. Thanks.
Councillor Killick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm really struggling with this one, even just to say it's a good high priority use of administration's time to spend evaluating this. And I just think of some of the examples that quickly come to mind, and raspberry bushes planted in the front yard that spread like wild flowers. You can't keep raspberry bushes out of your yard from when they're planted in a neighbor's backyard. They go underneath the fence and you end up with runners of raspberries in your neighboring yard. Same concept around canola, just could be approved, and it spreads like crazy, as we see around our own city. There are random canola plants all over the place. Clover, very shallow root system, even more shallow than grass, than long grass. So I don't know if I would want to spend time investigating, micro clover or this clover or that clover. When you Google clover, it says it's a very invasive species, but it's not listed on the invasive or noxious species, but it clearly plain language says it's very invasive, and it spreads from one neighbor to the next. Likewise, my comments around dandelions. I agree. All of these things may, be good for bees, but I think there are lots of other species of plants that are good for bees that can be planted. In particular, I look at my own lawn of an Ohio buckeye that is covered with flowers. It's one of the earliest flowering trees, supports thousands of bees, and is not invasive or does not spread to my neighbors. There are many other examples like that, but I just think that we are going to be getting into a very, very fine line between, what does a Shasta daisy look like that my wife plants versus an oxide daisy, which is a noxious plant and spreads like crazy as well. So I just think that if I'm looking forward to 6 months of administrative teams work on something that I foresee would not align with the vast majority of what we want or what residents would want as their front yard to look like. I'm really struggling to think that this should be a high priority of administration's time and work effort to move this one forward. I can think of many other examples. It's interesting that Caragana trees and hedges in Calgary are now which have been long used in people's yards, are now being called invasive, and Calgary has a program to rip those out. And I guess I'm struggling to say, do we, how far are we going to take this level of work? The other one was that in the backgrounder, there's a link to the Alberta Native Plant Council, and it talks about cautions of using wildflower seed mixes in people's yards. And it says, and I'm just going to read from it here briefly, there are three main problems with wildflower mixes. First is that they may not be native to the local area. In fact, this is usually not, and it's bolded in their wording, not the case. Most plants are wild somewhere, hence the term wildflower, but they're not native to Alberta. The second problem is that in most cases, wildflowers, there's always a chance they contain invasive species and possibly even noxious weeds. So someone could be inadvertently thinking that wildflower is going to be good and end up introducing a noxious weed. And then it actually goes on to say, when you're buying your wildflower seeds, it actually says avoid wildflower mixes. These usually contain species that are wild in Europe and other parts of North America, but not Alberta. It goes on to say the name daisy is another very good example. Some daisies are nasty weeds such as scentless chamomile and oxide daisy, whereas more simple terms, Shasta daisy, is acceptable. I just cannot see how we're going to come back after 6 months of administrative work to bring back to council and then have something that would be voted on as being acceptable to most residents. And for that reason, I don't support going forward with administration doing this work.
Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Anytime that you start talking about the community standards bylaw, you run the risk of getting into deep waters. I've personally been involved in a situation where one lawn was pristine and the other next door neighbor was not pristine. And one said, I'm growing the lawn that I want. And the other said, well, you worship your lawn, you should worship something different, right? It's ugly, no matter which way you look at it. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't work at making sure our community standards bylaw is as strong as it possibly can be. And to the point that you made earlier, Madam Mayor, it's been 10 years since we looked at it. And quite honestly, yeah, there's risk no matter which way you go, but I actually think that this work should be done and that we should, as a council, start to wrestle with what does it really mean to be the community standard in our bylaw of 2023 or 2024. And you know what, community standards change over time and ideas change over time. And what was acceptable for my generation is probably not acceptable to a younger generation and vice versa. So what does it mean then to represent all of the city of St. Albert? And so from my perspective, I think we need to do the work. And then it'll be a tough debate when the time comes. But you know, that's why we get elected, is to have those tough debates and to hear from the community what they believe to be acceptable and what is not. And so that's why I asked the question around, are we going to be given tools to educate so that people can give us the feedback based on the work that administration has done? So I think this is good work. We'll see how it plays out and we'll see how council votes.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Anyone else? Councillor Hughes?
Okay, you're gonna motion to, okay. You know, I appreciate what you have to say on this, Councillor Broadhead, and I really respect your opinion. The problem I have is what you said earlier, which is like one person's trash is another person's treasure and vice versa. And I'm very concerned about people being able to hide behind it once it moves forward and say, oh no, I'm naturalizing, as opposed to just not looking after your lawn. I understand the person who came forward, they had a very lovely little area. I think it looked like it wasn't a flower bed too, so I'm not quite sure why it wouldn't have been allowed. If there's a lot of flower beds, but you know, it's just challenging if you start providing loopholes where people suddenly don't have to take care of their lawn. And then they say, oh, it's because of, I'm suddenly going under this banner. So I'm not really sure how I'm going to go on this, but I have real concerns about just the unintended consequences of what we're potentially doing here. Take your words away, Ken. Because I think there could be some pretty good unintended consequences where it'll be difficult to encourage people to look after their yards that have chosen to not do so to the same standards as is normally expected of people living in a city. So that's why I'm going to leave it at that.
Councillor Mackay?
I figured I'm the only one that hasn't really weighed in on this one yet, and I don't really have much more to say. There's really good arguments on both sides of this debate, and I think I clearly share feelings on both sides. Obviously, this work is still going to take place, even if we don't decide to move forward today. We're going to have community standards bylaw come back, although we heard from administration it's not a priority right now. So by pushing this forward today, we then put it on their plate as a priority. That will come back with some good information, but I think you identified in an earlier question, Madam Mayor, that you know this is a discussion that we need to have at strategic planning. So maybe unintentionally you've added another variable into this, that maybe this isn't the right place and time right now to have this discussion, recognizing that you know we have, it is a priority as identified in our strategic plan. But I mean, what's good if we pass this forward today, as I think somebody else, I think Councillor Broadhead, you identified it. This is going to come back with a whole list of potential debate items, and we're going to be, you talked about being in the weeds phonetically, air quotes. I mean, we are really going to be in the weeds because we're going to be bringing pictures of what looks like a noxious weed and what doesn't. So that does concern me. that really concerns me in relation to that. And I don't know the best method going forward, whether it's through this motion that starts one process or through another way of having this at a broader discussion, either at a committee of the whole or strategic planning. So I'm gonna wait for closing arguments.
All right, I guess that's up to myself and then maybe Councillor Jolly. So I'm wholeheartedly supporting this motion. Councillor Mackay, just to the community standards bylaw, like I'm looking at it right now, it's 2010. It's huge. It talks about where you can store things. It talks about where you can park, how you shovel your sidewalk. It's like way more than weeds. And that's the conversation I think we should maybe have a strategic planning about when we make this a priority. Through this motion, if it passes, we would make alternative vegetation and landscaping options our direction for when the community standards bylaw comes back. Like this would just give staff direction. So they're very different. I feel like everyone in this room is jumping the gun on what administration may or may not propose in this if this passes. I did do a lot of research on this because I honestly thought this would be very easily supported, but my quick little bit of research sitting here, more sustainable and beautiful lawns. Think that turf grass is welcoming as it looks good for your bare feet. It's virtually no habitat for pollinators and other animals and plants that make up a healthy, diverse ecosystem. The fact that these lawns can be the fact is grass lawns can do substantial harm to the environment and do both vertebrates and insects harm. Birds, for instance, may ingest berries and seeds that have absorbed pesticides from the ground. Likewise, water or rainwater runoff from lawns carry pesticides and fertilizer into rivers, lakes, streams, oceans via the sewer system. I think our city, and I know the city of Edmonton has been do a no more mow campaign because we want to stop the mowing of lawns because even just the gas that goes into your lawnmower is bad for the environment. It says here that this is an American article, but it says here that every year across the country, lawns consume nearly 3 trillion gallons of water, 2 million gallons of gas from mowing, and 70 million pounds of pesticides. I did another quick Google search again, haven't verified anything because I was just doing my best, but Cochrane actually you can receive a rebate if you purchase rock drought resistant ground cover, including microclover, to replace your lawns. And it's because they're having such a water issue down south. You can get up to $150 from the city to do what we're debating right now. So leave your clippings on the lawn has been a campaign. As I mentioned earlier, I went to a TED Talk and Jim Hull was encouraging everybody to plant carrots on their front lawn. Like this is not a new thing. Obviously we're not going to have blockage when you back out of a driveway, Councillor Mansky. There'll be stuff in the bylaw that says you can't obstruct vision, those kind of things. So I just don't want us to jump the gun and to what we might see. But I think our community, especially that one example we had earlier this year, I thought the lawn was beautiful and it did look ugly after. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I'm not going to be the judge of that beauty. And I would like to actually see this come back to us. My lawn, for example, has a tiny little patch of grass in the front that has been overtaken by clover. So I just now mow it because I can't fight it anymore. But the rest of my front lawn is all like tall bedding plants, and I don't understand why they would qualify and clover wouldn't. So I think this is a good motion. And the number one thing that Councillor Jolly said in her opening arguments was what should convince most of us is it's in our strategic plan to look for these adaptations to changing climate, and water is one of those changes. When I was preparing my State of the City, I actually really struggled with what I was going to talk about on what we're doing to achieve that one strategic plan. And it's even void in our agenda for strategic planning because we're not doing anything on the strategic. So Councillor Jolly, that is the one key part of your debate that I thought was fantastic, is we have to move forward on what we set as a priority. And this is one way to help achieve it. So I'll let you close.
Thank you. I was going to reiterate that this is already in our strategic plan. So let's do it. I really appreciate the debate. I think, one of the comments made by Councillor Killick was about, you know, the importance of actually having native plants. In St. Albert, one of the interesting facts about Kentucky bluegrass, so that's the lawn grass that you see everywhere. It's native to Europe, North Asia, and the mountains of Algeria and Morocco. So definitely not native to here. So I don't think we're going to be banning Kentucky bluegrass anytime soon, but that was just kind of an interesting fact. The New York Times also had this great video from back in 2019 called The Great American Lawn, How the Dream Was Manufactured. So it really talks about the history of the modern lawn and really how new it is and the reasons for popularizing that type of lawn system, I guess. You know, in my front lawn, I grow hascaps, I grow chives, I grow strawberries that are shooting all into my lawn right now, blueberries, and I have a whole row of Saskatoon bushes. I'd love an alternative lawn for kind of the space that I have left. Certainly in the absence of that, we can expand our garden. You know, those fruits are really easy to maintain, you know, while still kind of going to the heart of really my purpose here, which, you know, when I was elected or when I was running back in 2017, I was asked, well, why are you running? And it's because I want to make a better community for my kids and my kids' kids. And part of that is making sure that we have a resilient environmental infrastructure in place for them to inherit. So, I hope for everyone's support on this. I think it's an exciting opportunity to modernize our bylaw and to do the right thing. Thank you.
All for the vote. Voting is closed. And that motion, passes with Mayor Herron, Councillor Broadhead, Councillor Jolly, and Councillor Mackay in favor. All right. So what time is it? 3:11. What is next on our agenda? Mike, you have a merging motion that is Snowflake Festival and but I think we should probably waive notice first. So I'll get you to read that part in.
We have a resident that had
Yeah, I'm just going to get you to read it in. Yes. Okay. So everybody knows what we're doing.
That the 20-day notice period for council motion pursuant to section 119-9 of the procedure bylaw is waived, and the debate on motion occur at the October 3rd, today, 2023 council meeting.
Okay, perfect. Mike. Thank you for sitting here for 2 hours listening to weeds. Coming out of the mic, I don't know if you're speaking as chair of the chamber or a resident. It's up to you, obviously, or both. But you have 5 minutes whenever you're ready. Go ahead.
Well, I can tell you that the Blue Jays are down 2-0, so believe me when I say I'll be brief. My name is Mike Howes. Yes, I am the chair of the Chamber of Commerce, St. Alberton District Chamber of Commerce. I'm here today to speak to you as a friend of the Snowflake Festival. As you are aware, I'm sure by now, the Chamber of Commerce board made the difficult decision about a month ago to cancel the Snowflake Festival. It's not a decision that came lightly, and it is not a decision they wanted to make. It is not a decision, as I've heard some people suggest, that the chamber doesn't want to be involved in the Snowflake Festival anymore or is tired of running it or any of that. I can tell you that the Snowflake Festival was basically saved by the Chamber of Commerce in 2009. It was run by the DBA, the Downtown Business Association, up until then, and it was called the Light Up St. Albert. When it was in jeopardy, the St. Albert Chamber of Commerce stepped up and helped out. And the chamber has been helping out in financing / finding sponsors for the event for many years. It did change its name around 13 or 14 to the Snowflake Festival. And just due to the erroneous constraints that it takes on staff, the 6 or 7 chamber staff worked basically 12, 14 hours a day the last 3 days putting that thing together. With the fact that the costs have gone through the roof, and the last couple of years since COVID, it has cost quite substantially to the chamber. So it's with those reasons that they decided to cancel it for this year. I asked for their blessing in trying to save it with some community support, some volunteers, and namely not relying solely on the chamber's resources, i.e. their staffing. Okay. I'm happy to report that we are able to find several people to join this group and would like to help out. And we have a tentative date now set for December the 1st. We believe we've pared back the amount or the budget so that we can make it affordable and something that we can carry on. And there is a long-term plan that I won't share with you at this point about carrying it forward, but it is something that we believe that St. Albert should not lose. I personally was down there last year. I've been there since 2009. There was well over 10,000 people. It's pales only to the farmers market and Rock in August, the events that I know. So it is something that I think we need to keep going. And I'm here to ask you to support Mike's Councillor Killick's motion.
I think last year might have been record breaking. It was huge last year.
It was.
Councillor Hughes has a question for you.
Sure.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for coming and being so patient.
Don't worry.
So I just feel people must come watch this just because they have a glutton for punishment or something. So, okay, so is there still, when you ran it before, was there still a subsidy from the chamber at that time? Obviously it's increased, but was it a break even before, or was it always being subsidized to some capacity by the chamber?
No, the chamber's always subsidized it and gotten sponsors. I'll mention that we several years ago had more support financially from the city than we've been receiving in the last few years. And apparently some of that responsibility falls on the chamber for a lack of requests, let's call it, or
okay,
putting forward.
So it increased this year to the point where they didn't think it was
the last
viable
2
to do
years, it's cost the chamber significantly.
a lot.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So you mentioned that there was a long-term plan. I'm not asking you to go through it with us today, but is the intention to continue to ask for ongoing support from the city after this year, or is it just this is a bridge over?
I can't speak to the funding model that we're looking for, but what we're looking for is a champion. And given the fact that the DBA previously ran this organization, and we believe that it is seen as a city/downtown event in the first place, we would like to see, and we are in discussions with the newly formed BIA to be able to take it over. And the discussion was that we would just drop it at the chamber level for a year or two until the BIA got up and running and things could be done. We've all seen what COVID did. And I can tell you just from Dale Nally's comment the other day on his booth, they had 1,000 cookies after COVID and gave out 200. Last year gave out all 1,000, said they could have given about 2,000 or 3,000 people. And we know that out of the 10 or 15,000 that were down there, over half of them are kids. So they want their cookies and their hot chocolate, to the point where, I hope this isn't on TV, kids will see it, but we're going to bring in 2 Santas this year to alleviate the lines. We literally had hundreds of people turned away at 9 or 9:30 that didn't get to see Santa last year.
Sure. Well, to be fair, I think it's because I held up the line. I had a really long list, but the other question, so you are saying that I guess the request for the 15,000, do we have an idea of what it's being necessary for, or is it just for general operations, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's the petting zoos, the Santas, there's the halls, there's all kinds of things that cost money. We're looking at ways of reducing that. Already this year, we've had several people do certain things in kind. Park and ride cost us money last year. and we did receive $1,500 from the city in the last couple of years in terms of funding. It just hasn't been significant enough. The numbers that we've been sharing, it was last year's budget was around $30,000, and we sustained about a $15,000 loss on the chamber's behalf.
Okay, so
that
basically
that was last year. The year before was worse, when it was still pre-post
Sure.
COVID.
So basically you're just looking to cover the costs that were a loss last year, just anticipating it'd be probably similar.
Yes, we're rejigging everything, but yes, we need to be able, along with the sponsors that we.
So just assuming for today that it were to move forward, is the city going to be listed as a major sponsor then of the event?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We think, just to piggyback off that, we think it already is kind of seen as a city event, and we just need to continue to push that. It is a St. Albert event, the same as Rock in August is a St. Albert event. It's no longer belongs to the Cosmos or to the Cruisers Car Club.
Yeah.
It's a St. Albert event now, and I think people just assimilate the two together. So the Children's Festival, it's the St. Albert Children's Festival now.
Right. It's just that we provide sponsorship to the Children's Festival, but we don't provide a lot to the Rock in August, for example. So I just want to make sure that like our name will be on there saying we're an actual sponsor.
There is a lot of in kind to Rock in August too, but we don't need to go there.
Yeah, I know I realize that. I just want to make sure that there's the intention to not overlook that fact. The other question I had, and that's just slipping, so I might let Councillor Jolly go first. Why did it take this long to decide to pull the plug? I guess it would have been ideal if they had notified you or anyone else a few months earlier about it, because you're like looking at 2 months away from trying to do it.
I agree.
Okay, so you don't really have an idea of why they took this long?
Just that it just got down to the crunch basically into August, and it was realizing that it was going to be impossible to do it.
I see.
And I guess like everything else in life, there's other influences, and some of the other events and things that we've been running haven't been as successful as they were pre-COVID either. And finances are getting tighter and tighter. And it's just not the case where we can say, well, we're going to rob Peter to pay Paul here, and we're going to lose money here, but we'll make it here. Everything is tightening up to the point where we've really got to look at it all. So
And how many people are you anticipating having at the event this year?
minimum 10,000.
Great, thank you. Obviously, weather dependent, yeah.
Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, are you here on behalf of the chamber?
I'm here on behalf of the Friends of the Chamber, or the Friends of the Snowflake Festival, I would like to call it.
Okay,
And Commerce has
so
made clear that they cannot afford to support this on their own. So if it's left to them, which it has been in the last few years to run this event, they were going to pull out.
Okay, so sorry, this is the first I've heard that it had been canceled. So the motion is to issue this support to the Chamber of Commerce to run this event. Is that not who would be running it?
The Chamber of Commerce will be running it, yes. The Chamber of Commerce is still financing it. They're still going to be paying the bills. They're still going to collect the sponsorships. Shelley's still involved. It's just not going to be an entirely run chamber event. We've got some more community people involved, let's put it that way.
Okay.
There's still 3 of us from the board that are still from the chamber board that are still on the committee too. So
Okay, and are you able to speak to why no application was made to the community events grant?
But which?
The community events grant. So we support community events through a grant every year.
I can just try and answer that, Councillor Jolly, that they had made the hard decision, that the chamber had made the hard decision that they were not able to support this. So no new grant was made before the cutoff of sending in a request for a community event grant. They had already kind of made the decision, decided not to apply for a grant. It hadn't been well communicated. When it was well communicated that the event was not going to be moving forward, there was a group of individuals that said, we just can't let this die. Let's find a way to bring forward some funding to, instead of or in lieu of applying for that community events grant, and a lot of other things that were dropped. We are going to have to play catch up ball on as well. So I think September 12th was a cutoff for community events grant, and we really didn't get started until just after the BIA was approved on September 19th is when there was real visibility around this potentially not proceeding. So it was within a week of things that transpired.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any questions of the speaker. I'll have more questions later.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. House. You might want to stick around for the debate. Process-wise, you guys might have wondered why I didn't actually go to a vote on the waiving of notice, but I wanted to get to Mr. House because no matter what, he would be allowed to speak. So I think before we get into any further debate or questions, I'll allow Councillor Killick to say why you think we should waive it. I think it's pretty obvious, but go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And yes, it just came to light very recently that, as I mentioned, that the chamber was no longer to be the prime driver of this event. And for that reason, to start and have meetings and get the coordination ready for December 1st, which is really only 2 months away, couldn't wait. Didn't seem that would be a good use of time to wait the 20 days notice period. We really needed to get started contacting providers. The mention of the petting zoo came up, but we can't make a commitment to the petting zoo to have them come to St. Albert until such time as we have financial commitment of financing of how that bill would be paid. So the request was to waive the 20 days notice, get it on the books as soon as we possibly can for debate. And with the second part of the motion of funding be approved, then we can start to make firm commitments to hire and do all of the things we need to do, like pay for advertising in the Gazette, hiring any of the contractors like a sound system or lights or petting zoo or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we needed that sense of urgency, and I appreciate council's approval to waive the 20 days notice on this.
All right, I see no one chiming into the waiving, so I'll call for the vote. Voting is closed. And that motion passes by majority or by unanimously, sorry. So I'll get you to read the second part in, Councillor Killick.
Thank you. That the city provide to the St. Albert and District Chamber of Commerce $15,000 in funding from the stabilization reserve in support of this December 1st, 2023 Snowflake Festival, and that the city of St. Albert provide event support in alignment with the city service standards on events or as determined reasonable and operational feasible by the CAO to enable the 2023 Snowflake Festival.
All right, before I accept it, I will go to questions. So Councillor Jolly, you said you had some questions?
Yeah, I don't know if this is for Mr. Fletcher, but would it be implied that this would follow all of our normal grant reporting requirements? So the chamber would have to send back reports kind of showing that the funds were used appropriately?
Thank you, Councillor. We can ask the chamber to do that, but we cannot compel them to do that. So short answer is no, this would be a one-time transfer of funds.
I guess to Councillor Killick, was it your intent that this was just like a check kind of free for all? They could do what they like with it?
Absolutely not. And I appreciate the question. And so we looked at a rough budget that.
Can I just interrupt you 1 sec, Councillor? In case it's not clear, Mr. House talked about the Friends of the Snowflake Festival. Councillor Killick is on it.
Yeah.
Okay, that helps. I was really confused.
Yeah.
So
I apologize. I should have made that very clear at the beginning. It's Mr. Mike House, Rosanna Fisher from KDM, Mark Kay from Iron Fit, Michelle McDonald from Trist, the downtown BIA, and myself that are the Friends of the Snowflake Festival. We are officially designated as Santa's helpers. So we're be wearing an elf green, the green safety vest during the event. But no, to Councillor Jolly's very serious question, our intention is to absolutely keep a full accounting record as we would with any other community organized event. One for just for good business practices. And the other one is so that we can have a better documentation that we can hand off to the next group that would want to run a similar event in the future, so that they would know how much money was spent and where it was spent. For example, having advertising in the Gazette, or having an insurance policy for the event.
So I guess Councillor Killick, then, as a follow-up to my question, would you be okay with a friendly just adding something to the end of it, and that an accountability report, the same as what we see in the community events grant program, would be required as a condition of this funding?
I absolutely have no problem with that.
Does anyone else have a problem with that? All right, we'll type some wording into the chat, maybe, Councillor Jolly.
Can I ask Marta to do that?
Yes, we'll get that done.
Okay. Any more questions? Go ahead, Councillor Hughes, you're up next.
Thank you. So, Councillor Mohill, since you're on it, what would be the consequences if this wasn't approved?
Well, without funding, we couldn't make any of the commitments, on very short notice, start to hire all the required participants. It goes right to renting the community hall for Santa. Basically, without money available, and we're using the chamber as a bank because they are a registered legal entity. So the money would go to them, and then they would pay the bills and keep a record for accounting purposes. Without that money, the event would die, and we wouldn't have anything for our residents to enjoy.
Okay, so basically what I'm hearing is that if we don't have proof of this today, the Snowflake Festival is really not going to be able to move forward this year.
Yep,
Okay.
it'll be dead. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Question?
Just one.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's just for clarity of anybody listening. So this is just intended to be a one-time fund, and hopefully that this will spur another group to come forward and meet. I mean, they could then follow through with going through the proper channels of getting access to other grants and other maybe available funding in the community, right?
Yeah, this is kind of what I would say is a bridging year between, as we mentioned, and we all know we were there September 19th when the BIA was approved, but it has to be set up, or I think the word stood up as an organization with bylaws and bank accounts, and all of those good things have to be created. But looking forward past this year as a kind of a bridging event, I envision that the BIA could take a partnership role, probably with the chamber as well, and maybe as the city as a third party, because we do already contribute a lot to it in services and kind, closing off roads, hanging Christmas lights, opening up, St. Albert Place, etc. But somebody has to be primed to drive it. But keep in mind, this is not only good for the downtown, but it's good for 10,000 or more residents from all across the whole city. So it's kind of I envision this being a bit of a hybrid going forward after this next year.
Any more questions? I'm seeing no more questions around the room, so I'll accept your motion, Councillor Killick.
Yeah. I think this is just a very unique situation in terms of timing of it being not being able to move forward with the chamber. They've done a great job, in a fantastic job in the past. the success of the event is almost its own worst enemy. It became too big for them to financially accommodate and resource wise to do all the work as well. So when I say too big, it's 10,000 people to 15,000 people downtown in a 4 to 6 hour period. That's just so significant. We don't want to lose that momentum. And the people were showing up early and leaving late. There were such large lineups to see Santa Claus. Kids were being turned away. But again, it just was so successful. We just don't want to let it drop. So some volunteers stepped up, and we'll try and shepherd it forward with good accounting practices to be able to do it this year on and have a really good event. The other thing I would say too is that it is moving very quickly. We are 2 months away. We probably should have started, 2 months ago. So if anybody would like to join us and help out, either volunteers directly or otherwise, that would be great. There will be a call for volunteers. It ties into a lot of other good things that we're doing too, that, council has a policy around identifying events that the Youth Advisory Committee could get involved in. Well, we all remember last year and previous years, the Youth Advisory Committee provided members that stood outside the post office and helped little kids fill out postcards to Santa, and they were put in the post office mailbox. So there's lots of community based engagement on this and support. We're hoping that we can ramp up sponsorship dollars as well to offset any of the costs. And I would also just like to acknowledge that there is a huge amount of work that the city does already to support this type of event, whether it be closing off roads, opening up St. Albert Place, providing some of the sporting equipment for the hockey game that was the road hockey game, cleaning up garbage afterwards, hanging the lights, getting the tree ready for the light up. The list is probably much longer than I know, and I will find out more. But I think it just meets so many of our priorities as a vibrant downtown community event, gets people out from all over. It's good for business. It meets many criteria, and I'm really looking forward to this being successful and hoping and praying for good weather.
Exactly. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for bringing this motion forward. I like Councillor Jolly didn't know that it was ever at risk until today or until I read this, and it's one of my favorite festivals in St. Albert, so I can't imagine it not going. So thanks to the group for stepping forward and for bringing this forward. I hope it's a bridging fund, and I'll be voting based on the idea that it's bridging. Hopefully the support will diminish over time. I suspect it'll be more than 1 year to get it fully self-sufficient, but thank you for what you're doing, and thank you, Mr. Howes, for coming and speaking to us here. Has my support. Thank you.
Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. So this is very unusual, and I think everyone knows here, I generally like to follow process, and this is not following process. That said, all events post-COVID are also really unusual, so I'm happy to support this today. I think this is a wonderful event in our community, and I'm glad that there are volunteers who have stepped up. Please reach out to the Youth Advisory Committee, because I know a lot of those members would be happy to volunteer at that event again. And I look forward to taking my family this year. Thank you.
Perfect. Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge Mike for taking I suspect just from what you've talked about that you were one of the lead people that said this can't die. And this is a really loved event in the community. It's definitely associated with St. Albert in wintertime. And in spite of the short notice, I feel like you and several of your colleagues just said, we're going to do whatever it takes to make this happen. So I appreciate the fact that you actually had just the willingness to do this, the tenacity to sit through this meeting for the past 3 hours, just to explain your situation for us. And then, you know, the determination to make sure this is going to be a success in 2 months. So thank you for everything you're doing for this. I think that the community will appreciate it. And really, this is, considering you're expecting 10,000 people, we're talking about $1.50 a person subsidy to make winter a lot more bearable for people. So thank you.
Councillor Killick to close.
Yes, thank you. There is a tremendous amount of work to move this forward in a very short period of time. And I'm looking forward to working on with the group to do that, and hopefully with a little bit more volunteers coming out to help us, we'll have a great event for the residents of St. Albert, and something that we will have a playbook, so to speak, to be able to hand off to other groups to do it in future years.
All right, call for the vote.
Do I need to read in the revised motion word?
Oh yeah, I guess what is it on the screen? Yeah, it's on the screen.
That the city provide to St. Albert District Chamber of Commerce 15,000 in funding from the Stabilization Reserve in support of December 1, 2023 Snowflake Festival. That the city of St. Albert provide event support in alignment with the city service standard on events, or as determined reasonable and operationally feasible by the CAO to enable the 2023 Snowflake Festival, and that an event accounting be provided to the city after conclusion of the event.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay. Voting's closed. Is that right? Okay, and that passes unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Killick. All right, I need a motion now, I think, to go in camera for,
we have information.
Oh, information requests, notice of motions. There's a few, some of the BIR ones we don't have to do, but I'll go to Shelley first. How about that? Anything, Wes? Councillor Jolly? Sheena?
I have a couple.
Okay, go ahead.
So just the BIR I had that changed to a notice motion. I thought I should probably just read into the record then that that Cheryl is happy, if nothing else. Poor woman. The city provides $2,500 in sponsorships to the 2024 to the Women Buildings Futures Program, funded from the 2023 Council Contingency Fund, the recipients selected by the Women Building Futures administrative process. And I had one other question that will be an IR that I don't have it written up, but I will send it. And I'm just, because we've had people ask about the process of, you know, when we do project management of road construction, for example, and before we were just using a penalty process if they had it. And then we know we discussed it in spring about just how we're doing it. So it will be a request for an update about whether we are using additional methods to motivate the projects to be finished in a timely fashion, just so we have an update on that. Thank you. That's it.
Councillor Mackay.
Do you want BIRs?
No, BIRs don't have to
Yeah,
go in.
I didn't think so, but I did have a question, and it just kind of is a good segue in from what Councillor Hughes just said. When we first came back from our summer recess, I had asked for an update on Villeneuve Road and was kind of told timeline was around middle of September, second week of September, because of the alignment with school. And then looking on the construction page website, it was the end of September. And then I drove it this morning and it wasn't open yet. I realize the far west end is open and allows access up into the Jensen gates, but the east side at Walmart is still blocked off. Do we have an update in relation to that?
We do very much so, Councillor. I'll ask Donnie George to provide an update.
Through the chair to Councillor Mackay. Yes, the quick update is we extended the timeline for another week. I know the paving was done over the weekend, but they still need to landscape the south end of that laneway, which definitely needs requirement to continue to close it. So another week of extension has been given to the contractor. I think the website is still saying early October, but we'll update, make sure that it's getting updated for us. And I have got Dean, if you got more information required, he's got probably more details on it.
So this time next week, Councillor, should be open and general landscape. Okay.
Good. Hey, Councillor Killick. Nothing?
Nothing, thank you.
Now can we go into camera? Can I have a motion? How about on this side of the room? Councillor. Go ahead.
All right, I move that council move in camera to have a confidential dialogue with the chief administrative officer pursuant to section 24(1)(a) of the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act.
All right, call for the vote. Raise our hands. Councillor Jolly. Okay, we are unanimously going into camera. Nothing in camera will need a public motion, Mr. Fletcher. So you want to pass the host to me? Pardon?